Tokyo, Japan, September 12, 1987. The Korakuen Stadium vibrated with the collective anticipation of 50,000 souls. The Bad World Tour, Michael Jackson's first solo tour, had arrived in Japan, bringing with it the full spectacle of the most elaborate stage production the music industry had ever witnessed. Backstage, in a private dressing room adorned with fresh flowers and bowls of carefully arranged fruit, red grapes and ripe peaches, Michael's favorites, the king of pop sat perfectly still as his makeup artist applied the final touches to his stage appearance. At 29 years old, Michael Jackson existed at the absolute apex of fame, a level of global recognition and adoration that perhaps no entertainer before or since has matched. Thriller had redefined what was possible in the music industry, and Bad, released just weeks earlier, was already on its way to producing an unprecedented 5 number-one singles. Yet despite this unparalleled success, those closest to Michael often observed a profound loneliness in him, a man simultaneously adored by millions and yet somehow isolated by the very enormity of his fame. In the corner of the dressing room, unnoticed by the bustling entourage of assistants, stylists, and security personnel, sat a travel kennel, larger than standard size. From within came occasional soft chattering sounds, barely audible above the pre-show activity. The kennel contained Michael's most unusual companion, a 3-year-old chimpanzee named Bubbles, dressed in a custom-made outfit that matched Michael's stage costume. A miniature black jacket with silver buckles and zippers, black pants, and even tiny silver socks. Bubbles had entered Michael's life a year earlier, rescued from a Texas research facility that trained animals for use in medical testing. Michael's first encounter with the then-infant chimp had been well documented by the press, who largely treated the adoption as another eccentricity of a star increasingly portrayed as detached from ordinary reality. What the press didn't capture, what they couldn't see, were the quiet moments between performances, in hotel rooms and private lounges, when Bubbles became not a novelty or an extravagance, but simply a companion to a man who found human connections increasingly complicated by his unprecedented fame. Though it wasn't public knowledge, tonight would mark a departure from the carefully choreographed perfection of the Bad Tour's previous performances. After weeks of considering the idea, Michael had decided to bring Bubbles on stage during the concert, not as a gimmick or spectacle, but as a genuine sharing of something important to him with his audience. The only person he had informed of this plan was his longtime stage manager, who had initially expressed concern about the unpredictability of bringing an animal into a performance environment, especially one as precisely timed and technically complex as a Michael Jackson concert. "I understand the risk," Michael had said quietly, in the gentle, thoughtful voice that so contrasted with his electrifying stage presence. "But I want them to see him, not just as something exotic or strange, but as someone important to me. I think they might understand me better if they see us together." The stage manager, having worked with Michael for years and witnessed the genuine bond between him and Bubbles, had finally agreed, rearranging the show's timing slightly to accommodate a brief, unscripted moment during the acoustic section of the concert. Now, as the final preparations for the performance reached their culmination, Michael turned his attention to the travel kennel. He crouched down, opening the door and extending his hand with a gentleness that those who knew him well recognized as his most authentic self. "Hey, buddy," he said softly. "Almost time." Bubbles emerged, taking Michael's hand with the careful precision of their practiced greeting. Those present in the dressing room paused briefly in their tasks, still somewhat amazed by the interaction between the superstar and the chimpanzee. The easy communication, the obvious trust, the sense of two beings who had somehow found understanding across the vast divide of species. A knock at the door signaled the 5-minute warning. Michael nodded, more to himself than to anyone in the room. He guided Bubbles back into the travel kennel with a few reassuring words and a final gentle pat on the head. Then, with the transformation that had always amazed those who witnessed it, Michael Jackson, the soft-spoken, somewhat shy man, receded, replaced by Michael Jackson, the performer. Posture straightening, eyes focusing with laser intensity, energy seeming to vibrate from his slender frame. He moved toward the door, pausing only to say to his assistant, "Bring him to the side stage during human nature. I'll signal when." Then he was gone, moving with purpose down the corridor toward the platform that would lift him onto the stage to meet the thunderous anticipation of 50,000 waiting fans. The concert began as it always did, with an explosion of sound, light, and energy as Michael appeared seemingly from nowhere, landing in a pose of such perfect stillness that it made his subsequent movement all the more electric by contrast. For the first hour, the show unfolded with the precision and spectacle that had already made the Bad Tour legendary. The intricate choreography, the revolutionary integration of film and live performance, the seamless transitions between high-energy dance numbers and emotion-laden ballads. Through it all, Michael commanded the massive stage with a presence that seemed to expand to fill the entire stadium, drawing every eye to his slightest movement, every ear to the nuances of his voice. Then came the acoustic section, a brief respite from the high-energy performance that allowed Michael to showcase the purity of his voice and create a more intimate connection with the audience, despite the enormity of the venue. As the familiar opening notes of Human Nature began, Michael moved to the center of the stage where a single spotlight isolated him in a pool of light, the rest of the massive stage falling into darkness. His voice, starting soft and building with emotional intensity, filled the stadium with the song's haunting melody. The audience swayed, many holding lighters aloft, creating a sea of tiny flames that stretched to the farthest reaches of the venue. As the song reached its bridge, Michael glanced to the side of the stage and gave the almost imperceptible nod that was the prearranged signal. His assistant, waiting nervously in the wings with Bubbles, took a deep breath and approached the stage, the chimpanzee walking beside her with surprising composure given the noise and energy of the environment. As they reached the edge of the darkness that bordered the spotlight's pool, Michael extended his hand without breaking the song's flow, a gesture simultaneously toward the assistant and the audience, a subtle asking of permission, a gentle introduction. The assistant stopped at the light's edge, but Bubbles, recognizing Michael, continued forward with the confident stride of absolute trust. When he stepped into the light, a murmur rippled through the audience, surprise, confusion, curiosity. Michael, without missing a note, knelt down to Bubbles' level, continuing to sing as he gestured for the chimpanzee to join him. What happened next would become one of the most unexpected and touching moments of the entire Bad World Tour. Bubbles, displaying a sensitivity to the performance that seemed almost uncanny, didn't rush toward Michael as he might have in private. Instead, he approached slowly, almost reverently, seeming to understand intuitively that this was not their usual play, but something more formal, more significant. When he reached Michael, he simply stood beside him, occasionally glancing out at the vast sea of humans with evident curiosity but no sign of fear. Michael rose from his kneel, continuing the song while placing one gentle hand on Bubbles' shoulder, a gesture at once protective and proud, as if to say, "This is my friend." The audience's initial surprise had given way to something else, a collective softening, visible even from the stage as expressions of bemusement transformed into smiles of genuine delight. As the song built toward its emotional peak, Michael performed a simple but significant gesture that would be captured in thousands of photographs and discussed for years afterward. He removed the single sequin glove that had become his signature, the boundary between Michael the icon and Michael the person, and for a brief moment held it toward Bubbles, who reached for it with the careful precision that characterized their private interactions. The glove was far too large for the chimpanzee's hand, but the symbol was clear and powerful, a sharing of identity, an extension of self, an invitation into his world. As the song's final notes faded, Michael knelt again to Bubbles' level, whispering something that the microphones didn't catch, but that caused the chimpanzee to place one hand gently on Michael's cheek, a gesture so tender, so clearly affectionate that it elicited an audible ah from the audience, rolling like a wave from the front rows to the farthest reaches of the stadium. There was a moment of complete silence, a rarity in a venue holding 50,000 people. Then, as if released from a spell, the audience erupted in applause that was qualitatively different from their earlier responses to Michael's technical brilliance or vocal power. This applause carried a warmth, an emotional resonance that acknowledged they had been permitted a glimpse of something genuine, a moment of connection that transcended performance. Michael, always acutely sensitive to the energy of his audiences, clearly felt the shift. His smile, not the practice stage smile, but something more vulnerable, more real, briefly illuminated his face as he guided Bubbles toward the assistant waiting at the edge of the light. With a final gentle pat, he sent the chimpanzee back to the wings, then turned to face the audience once more. "Thank you," he said simply, his voice carrying clearly through the sophisticated sound system. "That was Bubbles. He's my friend." There was a nakedness to the statement, an unguarded quality rarely heard in Michael's public speech. The audience responded with another wave of warm applause, many wiping away unexpected tears. The show continued, returning to its spectacular choreography and technical wizardry, but something had shifted in the atmosphere of Korakuen Stadium. A connection had been established that went beyond entertainer and audience to something more fundamentally human, a shared recognition of a universal need for companionship, for understanding, for a relationship uncomplicated by expectation or judgment. After the concert, in the privacy of his hotel suite, Michael sat quietly with Bubbles curled against him, both still in their matching outfits, though Michael had removed the elaborate jacket and boots. His personal photographer, one of the few people permitted into this private space, captured a series of images that would never be released to the public, but that would remain among Michael's personal favorites. The superstar and the chimpanzee, exhausted but content, united in the peaceful aftermath of shared experience. "Did you feel it?" Michael asked softly, the question directed not at anyone in the room, but at Bubbles himself. They understood. The chimpanzee, whether comprehending the words or simply responding to the tone, pressed his forehead briefly against Michael's chin in a gesture that regular observers of their relationship recognized as affection. The tour's publicist, reviewing the night's coverage, was astonished at the media response. Even publications typically critical of Michael's perceived eccentricities described the moment with Bubbles as surprisingly moving and a rare glimpse of authentic connection. The Japanese press, perhaps culturally more attuned to the nuances of interaction, wrote extensively about the profound loneliness visible beneath the superstar's carefully constructed facade and how the relationship with Bubbles seemed to provide a sanctuary of unconditional acceptance in a life otherwise defined by unrelenting scrutiny. If this story moves you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more moments that define the king of pop's extraordinary journey. In the days that followed, Michael incorporated Bubbles into several more performances, always during Human Nature, always with the same unscripted, organic quality that made each appearance feel like a genuine sharing rather than a calculated element of the show. Audiences came to anticipate these moments, the energy in each stadium shifting perceptibly when the song began, a collective holding of breath as they waited to see if tonight would include a glimpse of this unusual but touching relationship. Fan mail, which had always arrived by the thousands, took on a new dimension. Along with the usual praise for his music and performance, many letters now included stories of the writer's own relationships with animals, their own experiences of finding connection and comfort across the species barrier. Michael, who had always personally reviewed selections of his fan mail, was deeply moved by these responses. "They're seeing me," he remarked to his assistant after reading a particularly touching letter from a young Japanese girl who described how her dog had helped her through her parents' divorce. Not the performance, not the moonwalk or the music, but me. It was a distinction that those closest to Michael understood was profoundly important to him. This separation between his public persona and his private self, and the rare, precious moments when the boundary between them briefly dissolved. For Michael, the decision to bring Bubbles on stage had never been about creating a spectacle or generating publicity. It had been about sharing something, someone, who had become a genuine source of comfort and companionship in a life increasingly defined by isolation. The fact that audiences had responded not with bewilderment or judgment, but with emotional recognition and warmth was deeply affirming. As the tour progressed through Asia and into Europe, the relationship between Michael and Bubbles continued to evolve both on stage and off. The chimpanzee, initially somewhat overwhelmed by the scale and energy of the performances, gradually became more comfortable with his brief appearances, even developing what Michael's dancers jokingly referred to as stage presence, a composed, dignified bearing that somehow matched the emotional tone of human nature perfectly. Backstage and in hotels, Bubbles became an unofficial mascot for the entire tour company. Crew members who had initially regarded the chimpanzee with skepticism found themselves looking forward to his antics during long setup days. Dancers taught him simplified versions of their routines, delighting in his surprisingly rhythmic attempts to mimic their movements. Security personnel, tasked with maintaining Michael's increasingly necessary isolation from the public, found their own spirits lifted by Bubbles' uninhibited joy and curiosity. But it was in the private moments, captured only occasionally by Michael's personal photographer and never intended for public view, that the true nature of their bond was most evident. Michael reading aloud from his favorite books with Bubbles listening intently beside him, both napping peacefully on a hotel sofa after the exhaustion of a performance. Bubbles comforting Michael during the migraine headaches that periodically plagued him, sitting quietly with one small hand placed gently on Michael's arm until the pain subsided. Years later, long after Bubbles had grown too large and strong to safely remain in Michael's direct care and had been relocated to a sanctuary where he could live more naturally with other chimpanzees, those who had witnessed their relationship would speak of it with a surprising degree of reverence. It wasn't what people thought, not some celebrity extravagance or eccentricity, recalled one of Michael's longtime security team members. There was something, I don't know how to describe it except to say there was something healing between them, like each gave the other something they couldn't get anywhere else. The impact of those moments during the bad tour, when Michael chose to share his unusual friendship with audiences around the world, extended far beyond entertainment. Wildlife conservation organizations reported significant increases in donations and public interest following Bubbles' appearances. Several prominent primatologists credited Michael with humanizing chimpanzees for a generation of fans who might otherwise never have developed an interest in these remarkable creatures or the challenges they faced in the wild. More subtly, but perhaps most significantly, the genuine affection visible between Michael and Bubbles contributed to a gradual shift in how the public perceived the King of Pop. Through his music and performances, Michael had always connected with audiences on an emotional level, but these unscripted moments with Bubbles revealed a vulnerability, a need for connection that made the superstar suddenly, strikingly relatable. In a 1988 interview, one of the few in which he spoke openly about his relationship with Bubbles, Michael offered perhaps the most revealing insight into what the chimpanzee meant to him. People ask why I'm drawn to animals, particularly chimps. It's because I identify with them. I feel I'm one of them. I can look into their eyes and tell that they're innocent, they're special, and they need our protection. Bubbles doesn't care if I'm Michael Jackson star. He just cares that I'm Michael, his friend. It was a rare moment of unguarded honesty from an artist who had learned, through painful experience, to carefully manage his public image. But in those few sentences lay the key to understanding what audiences had witnessed on that September night in Tokyo and throughout the subsequent tour. Not a calculated performance element, but a genuine relationship between two beings who had somehow found in each other a respite from loneliness, a space of unconditional acceptance in lives otherwise defined by very different kinds of confinement. Today, a small display in the Michael Jackson Museum contains artifacts from those tour appearances. The matching jackets worn by Michael and Bubbles, a collection of photographs capturing their moments on stage, an excerpt from Michael's personal journals discussing how meaningful it had been to share this relationship with his audiences. Visitors often linger at this display, moved by this glimpse of the man behind the carefully constructed image. A man who found in his connection with a rescued chimpanzee something that perhaps eluded him in his human relationships. Simple, unconditional acceptance. If you've been moved by this glimpse into the unique bond between Michael and Bubbles, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Together, we keep alive the memory of these small but significant moments that revealed the heart behind the incomparable talent of the King of Pop. In his final years, long after Bubbles had moved to the sanctuary, Michael would occasionally visit his former companion. Staff reported that despite the years of separation, the chimpanzee recognized him instantly, rushing to the fence with evident excitement. During these visits, Michael would sit quietly for hours, sometimes reading aloud as he had done years before, sometimes simply sharing the peaceful companionship that had been so rare and precious in his tumultuous life. After Michael's untimely passing, the sanctuary created a special area in Bubbles' enclosure, a quiet space with a small bronze plaque bearing a simple inscription: "Some friendships transcend understanding." It stands as a fitting memorial to a connection that, for a brief, luminous moment during the Bad World Tour, touched millions by offering a glimpse of something genuine and unguarded in the life of the world's most famous and perhaps most misunderstood entertainer.